Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive into all things real estate. We always bring you the most interesting trends and insights. And this week is no exception. We're looking at data from REMAX Escarpment in Niagara for the week of December 1st to the 7th, 2024. Now, what makes this data particularly juicy is it gives us a peek behind the curtain. It shows us how buyers are actually behaving, not just what the market stats are telling us. So whether you're thinking about buying or selling, or maybe you just like to keep your finger on the pulse of the market like me, you're definitely going to want to stick around.
Absolutely. This data tells a fascinating story, and one of the things that jumped out at me right away was this seeming contradiction. We see that weekly
Yeah.
appointments are down 8.6%, but then you look at the monthly figures, and appointments are actually up 3.9% compared to December of last year.
Okay, so that's a head scratcher, right?
Yeah,
How could appointments be down for the week but up for the month?
right. It's a great question, and it shows how important it is to look at the bigger picture. One possible explanation is that December 2024 just had a really strong start. Think about it. Maybe a lot of buyers were motivated to get things moving before the holidays, so we had this initial surge at the beginning of the month, which could lead to a higher monthly figure even if things have slowed down a bit more recently.
So it's like the holiday shopping rush, but for houses.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's trying to get their offers in before things shut down.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So speaking of timing, this next data point is pretty interesting. Friday, December 6th was the busiest day for appointment bookings that week. Almost 400 appointments booked on a Friday. Now, I don't know about you, but Friday night usually means pizza and a movie, not house hunting.
Well, you have to think about it from the buyer's perspective. For a lot of people, Friday is the start of the weekend. It means more flexibility to go to viewings and maybe even put an offer in over the weekend if they see something they like.
So it's all about strategic timing. I like it. Friday Frenzy isn't just a catchy name. Okay, let's talk about this appointment sold index because it's one of those metrics that can really help us understand the market. Right now, it's sitting at 9.1, which is up from last week, but down from a high of 11.1 back in mid-November. So break it down for us. What does this index actually tell us about the market?
So the appointment sold index is basically a measure of how quickly properties are moving. A high index means you have a lot of people looking and buying, which usually means it's a pretty competitive market. That dip we saw from mid-November could suggest that things are starting to cool off a bit, but that recent uptick tells us that the market is still quite active.
Okay, so it's like a thermometer for buyer motivation. Speaking of motivated, that's the next data point. It's a big one. Solds are exceeding new listings by a whopping 17.6%.
Wow. Yeah, that definitely says seller's market.
So how does that impact the whole balance of power between buyers and sellers?
Well, it basically means that you have more buyers than homes for sale. Simple supply and demand. And in that kind of situation, sellers usually have more leverage, which can often mean higher sale prices.
So if you're thinking of selling your place now, might be a pretty good time. Okay, let's zoom in on those regional differences in popular price points because we saw some really interesting variations there. What were some of the things that stood out to you?
Well, in both Hamilton and Halton, the $1-2 million range is really dominating, which suggests that there is a strong appetite for higher-end properties in those areas. But here's where it gets interesting. In Halton, the $950,000 to $1 million range actually dropped from second to fourth most popular. So that could be a sign that buyer preferences are shifting there. Or maybe it just reflects limited inventory in that specific price bracket.
So even within a region, you can see these subtle shifts happening. Now, what about Niagara? How does it compare?
Well, in Niagara, the sweet spot seems to be the $550,000 to $600,000 range. And that's held steady at the top for a few weeks now.
So it seems like each region is attracting a slightly different type of buyer.
Absolutely. And those differences can tell you a lot about what kind of lifestyle each area offers.
So it's not just about the numbers, it's about the story behind the numbers. All right, let's do a quick recap before we head into part 2. We started with those seemingly contradictory appointment numbers, down for the week but up for the month, which reminds us that it's always important to look at the bigger picture. Then we decoded the Friday frenzy phenomenon. Turns out it's not just a random spike, but a reflection of buyer behavior and strategic timing. We learned how the appointment sold index acts like a market thermometer, giving us insights into buyer motivation and how quickly properties are moving. And finally, we zoomed in on those regional variations in popular price points, which revealed some fascinating differences in the types of properties and lifestyles that are in demand in each area.
It's a lot to digest, but remember, this is just a snapshot of the market during the first week of December.
Exactly. But with the right knowledge and a bit of guidance, you can navigate those shifts and achieve your real estate goals.
Absolutely. Whether you're buying, selling, or just trying to make sense of it all, knowledge is key.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our real estate deep dive. Thanks for joining us. It's been a pleasure exploring this fascinating world with you.
It's been a great conversation.
Until next time, happy house hunting, everyone.